Hi, I'm Faith Torstensen, and this is my digital life map for human growth and development. I'm currently a senior here on campus and involved in my fourth year on the softball program, or in the softball program, excuse me. And though I do have one academic year left of eligibility, I do not have another one of softball, so this will be my last year involved in that program. But in addition to the softball program, I am also involved in choir and will also be involved in it next year, and the summer workers program both last year and this year as well. Though last year I was involved in the grounds team and really enjoyed my experience with that, I've decided to switch and transition into the maintenance team here on campus with Dennis Leinen as my boss. And my sister Grace will also be in the same program as well. Gracie and I both are the youngest of five, and out of the two of us, I'm the oldest because I am older by a minute. And we are both originally from San Pedro, California. However, because we have been living on campus the past 2 summers, we are technically considered as residents of Nebraska. So throughout this presentation, I'm going to go throughout the first 2 years of my development, then I'm going to touch upon my early childhood development, my middle childhood development, my adolescence development, and my adulthood development. But before I do move on, I just kind of wanted to touch upon the photos here that are on this slide. So this first photo is me when I was about 3 or 4 months old with my older sister Allison on the right. And then this this middle picture here is of my family and I when we used to go ATVing as a form of just like family bonding and spending time together before we got really into softball. Now I don't know which one is which, and I've asked my family members, both my mom, my dad, my aunts, uncles. Nobody really knows who is who, but I know that this is Gracie and I both. And then this is my sister Candace. This is my older sister Amber, my mom, my dad, and my other older sister Allison. And this picture on the right here is my sister Gracie and I slumped after a meal because that's something that we do, like even to this day. So I thought it was just kind of funny to just bring that part of our personality onto this presentation as well. So throughout the presentation, as I go through each stage of development, I will also be talking about biological, cognitive, psychological, and spiritual development in this development. So I wanted to, before getting into my information here on this slide about my biological development, I wanted to touch upon whether I was advanced or behind. And because I am a twin and twins are typically born as premature, the only part of my biological development that was really behind or that was kind of a setback for me was just my weight or my low birth rate. But thankfully, we were able to rectify that in the NICU after a few weeks. So a vast amount of biological growth occurred in the first 2 years of my development. My first 4 months alive, my body weight doubled in size, and by my first year alive, it tripled. In this period of rapid growth, my brain grew the quickest, and by the age of 2, my brain grew to be about 75% of the weight that it would be in my adult years. Crazy. But anyways, because of this, my body put a protective measure into place for my brain, which is called head sparing. So what head sparing means is essentially, for example, if I didn't have as much like nutrition as my body was needing, rather than like it instantly going to my head and like my brain shutting off, it would begin with other organs and work their way up to where the brain would be the last thing to shut off. And so, with that being said, I'm going to move on to my cognitive development. In the first 2 years of my life, I was considered to be in the sensory motor stage of cognitive development. In this phase of my development, I experienced two distinct forms of or systems of operations: sensation and movement. I used my senses of touch, taste, hear, smell, and sight to engage in the world around me and learn that each action has a consequence. Whether it be shaking a rattle to get a specific noise, or accidentally bumping my head into something or like my body into something and then knocking it off, like a remote on a table or knocking over a glass of water or something like that. I also learned about object permanence and being able to recognize people and objects from a distance rather than just using my binocular vision. With that being said, so I just wanted to move on to my psychological development. When I was an infant, touch was often more sensitive and intense for me than my other senses, and this is why growing up I would wrap my hands around my dad's fingers to soothe myself, or I would cry when cold air would rush against my exposed skin when my parents or older sisters would change one of my diapers. In addition to learning soothing by way of touch, at 7 months, I learned to babble in my first year. And in my first year, I learned to speak my first words, which was dada. And I began to use this as a hollow phrase to communicate until my naming explosion occurred later when I was around 16 months old. Moving on, I want to talk about my spiritual development in this stage. So, in my first 2 years of life, my parents spent most time with me, or the time that my parents had spent with me was of utmost importance. Adequate time spent engaging in physical touch and love expressed by my parents throughout this critical period was crucial for the development of a healthy attachment pattern and my mental and emotional well-being that would last well into my adulthood. Which thankfully I was not necessarily behind the curve for this, but I was also not advanced. I was right on par. Moving on to my early childhood. So again, as in the previous section, I'm going to explain these photos before I move on and talk about my development. So in this photo on the left, it's my sister Gracie and I winning some softball trophies after our team had won the championship. And then this middle photo here is me with gummy stars on my cheeks because I thought it was funny. And the background here, you can't really tell, but this was at an amusement park that my family and I had grown up going to. And in this photo on the right, it's my dad and my sister Gracie and I. This is Gracie, this is me, at a car show, which is also another hobby that our family did before we really got heavily into softball. So in my biological development, through immense biological changes occurring during this part of my life, one of the biggest biological changes was my body proportions, my myelination continuation, and my nutrition. So in this time, my torso grew exponentially, as my torso has always been much longer than my legs, and my belly began to stretch out. My arm rolls and my little baby chunk skin kind of expanded to cover a lot more distance and account for my limbs and my new limb growth. And with this growth, my body persisted in myelination, which is forming a fatty layer of protection, which is called myelin, around nerve axons to enhance the neurological connection in the brain. In addition to altering bodily proportions and myelination continuation, nutrition became a concern. Because of my growing body and new capacity for demanding physical activity, such as riding a bike, running around the backyard, or also engaging in softball and like other sports that I had done, which were soccer, basketball, and volleyball, I became hungry a lot more often and was prone to snacking on non-nutritional snacks such as jalapeno Cheetos and Rice Krispie treats, and consequently, I was not receiving proper nutrition. And though I had a fast metabolism and did not become obese, this was definitely a concern. Oddly enough, I still was not behind any curve. I was also right on par. And this wasn't necessarily a challenge or a setback. Because of my fast metabolism, I kind of got through unscathed. So moving on to my cognitive development. So in tandem with persisting myelination, which helps with memory and other aspects of cognitive development as well, I began to engage in fantasy play. And this type of play, like playing house, pretending to be my favorite animal from Winnie the Pooh, pretending to like run around with like a tail, or acting as though I was like a runway model with my older sister's high heels. Things like that allowed me a space to be creative and practice problem solving skills, as well as increase my social circle with my sister and my friends and engage in my community in an effective and age appropriate manner. So, moving on to my psychological development of this stage of my life. So, in this part of my early childhood, I reached another critical period, which is called emotional regulation, which involves emotional regulation, which is the ability to control the manner in which I decide to express my emotions or feelings. And between 3 and 5, I began to learn how to recognize and process emotions, as well as how to distinguish them. Okay, so what I mean by disguising emotions and learning how to do that is best explained in an example of Christmas presents or birthday presents in which the child did not or was not particularly fond of the gift that they had received. So, in a young child who's like 3 to 5 years old, the moment they see that this gift isn't something that they want, they instantly make a face and they don't know to manage that or to, in a sense, mask that. And so you can tell right away just by reading their face that they don't like the gift. Whereas a much older child is able to mask that and to be polite. So that way the person giving the gift might not have their feelings hurt and things like that. So also during this time of my psychological development, or during this early childhood psychological development, is when I had my first encounter with guilt. This was during an experience with my older sister Candace that regarded laundry. She had asked me to help her fold and put away some clean clothes that had just gotten out of the dryer, and I said no, because I didn't want to. I wanted to spend time with my friends, I wanted to ride bikes, I wanted to just goof off, like I didn't want to have to do chores. No way. But then she stated firmly that I needed to listen to her, and almost instantly, I called her a bitch. Also, my first time using a curse word. She gave me a look of disappointment, which was followed by anger, and immediately after that, I felt flushed and became instantly regretful of the word that I had just called her, because I knew that it wasn't okay. Like, that wasn't right. But that was my first experience with guilt, and which is also crucial in my development. So, moving on to spiritual development. Around this time in my childhood, some of my peers began to be more aggressive, whether it be simply taking on another person's toy forcefully, or bullying someone verbally, or with physical aggression. This kind of aggression became more prevalent. And in addition to the aggression that I was now surrounded with, empathy and antipathy appeared as I learned not to like specific peers of mine that stole, or a specific peer of mine that stole my Cinderella Polly Pocket doll. So, as well as this kind of development, or this part of my spiritual development, I was also introduced to Jesus for the first time. I began going to Sunday school and hearing about Easter and Jesus riding in on a donkey. And I didn't really know what to think of it quite yet, other than the fact that these are like pretty cool stories. Like, this Jesus dude seems pretty chill. And I mean, yeah, that's all I thought about that. Also, I want to touch back upon whether or not I was advanced or behind, and then any challenges or setbacks that I might have faced. Again, I wasn't advanced or behind, other than educationally, which my mom and I were able to work through by doing some school in the summer to be able to help me catch up, which I classify that as a win because it allowed me a space to work through hardship and to have a belief in myself that I can now do that, or that I could now do that. So moving on to the next part of my development, which is my middle childhood. And again, I'm going to explain these photos before I move on. So around this part of my life is when softball really started to amp up. This is Gracie, some of our teammates. Don't really remember these girls' names. Oh wait, no, this girl's name is Chloe. This is Layla. This is me. And I don't remember her name. But this was one of Gracie and I's first softball teams that we had grown up on. And then moving to this middle photo here, this is the all-star team that Gracie and I had made previously after this year here. And this is me on the right, and this is Gracie on the left, right before our championship game in a really big tournament that we had in San Juan Capistrano, which we won. And then this last photo here on the right is my sister Allison, me, and Gracie at the Grand Canyon, getting ready to view that for the first time. Also, I don't know if you can see, and I don't know if this is the right photo, but there's a dancing school here that I thought was really cool and I had taken a picture of. So moving on to my biological development in my middle childhood. Though I specifically remember measuring my height at 4 foot 5 inches after a minor growth spurt, 53 inches to be exact. I was extremely proud of this, claim it to this day. Anyways, at this time in my life, my biological growth mainly plateaued. This point in my life is also when athletics ramped up and I began to really focus on softball and began to play softball more frequently and at a heightened competitive level as well. This implementation of persistent exercise provided me an outlet to express bursts of energy in productive ways and thus allowed me to to experience mental clarity, to be able to be actively participating in a class and other educational activities as well. So it just helped me to be an overall healthier person, doing better in school, doing better in social engagement, and doing better physically and also nutritionally as well, which consequently caused me to be advanced in this part of my development. And though I didn't experience any setbacks that allowed me a space to grow, I was still growing regardless. And then with this mental clarity, I also learned selective attention and combated childhood obesity successfully. Moving on to my cognitive development of this stage. According to Piaget, at this time in my life, I was in the initiation of concrete operational thoughts and that stage of cognitive development. And this operational thoughts are working with or producing action based on new logical formations. At this point in my development, I began to learn things such as conservation of matter, classification, and seriation. And so classification is essentially grouping together a bunch of different things that have similar or like qualities into one kind of like category, such as like different size balls or like different shaped glasses and so forth. I also learned to build on my base of knowledge through utilizing my working memory and the ability to store and retrieve each piece of information for desired social interaction, sport, not just with softball, also with like PE and things like that, and dance as well, and also with understanding of classroom material and being able to grasp that successfully. Moving on to my psychological development. So in this part of my middle childhood, I did have some setbacks. I had some issues with self-esteem and a lot of insecurities in that my older sister Amber helped me to work through. And thus I was able to classify as a win because of my ability to be able to work through that. In this part of this development, I also discovered the importance of pragmatics, which is participating in conversation with regard and intentionality and paying attention to social rules and with an awareness of what is socially acceptable in particular contexts. In pragmatics, I learned formal and informal code. While learning pragmatics, I also learned what it means to have a growth mindset and that this type of mindset is what benefits me in learning from mistakes and growing as an individual rather than being a victim or like trying to evade understanding or viewing my mistakes through a pessimistic or a fixed mindset kind of a lens. During this stage of my life, I also began to care more about what my peers thought of me and placed a higher value in opinions of others. Consequently, I sought advice from my older sister Amber and my mom quite a bit when needing external validation or help with processing and working through insecurities to be able to have my healthy sense of self-esteem that I now have. Moving on to my spiritual development. As my cognition developed, I grew curious of Jesus further than what I had already known of him and wanted to seek him out a little bit more. And I was also curious about the resurrection, kind of just as a whole too. In school, I learned of like the Mesopotamian Empire, and I was interested in how Jesus fit into that part of history. I also began to tie Jesus into things that my parents and my older sister Amber taught me, such as the golden rule, intentionality and telling the truth, and other moral values that I had grown up knowing were true, but didn't really know why. Though I knew Jesus taught his followers to love him and others while doing good, abiding by like a certain moral code, which is technically what the doing good is, and living in submission and obedience to him out of love for him, and relationship with him as well. I wondered what Jesus and his role in morals in history were. And so I questioned why Jesus called me to be kind and to love people who were aggressors or bullies and what that meant for me. I also questioned why Jesus didn't want me to lie. And if it was really that bad, if it meant getting to have extra sweet treats after dinner without any repercussions or getting to have extra time spent with friends off of a little white lie that, oh, we're just not done with our homework assignment yet. When no, we just wanted to gossip or to watch a movie or to stay later for dinner. Anyways, moving on to adolescence. Yay! So again, as in the previous sections, I'm going to explain each photo a little bit and then move on. So this photo is my last travel ball team that I was playing on before coming to York University, which was York College at that time. And this is a little team bonding experience that we had with each other, where we went to Huntington Beach and then got to walk around the shops for a little bit and just have a really nice time. This is my older sister, Amber, who's on the right-hand side here, Gracie and I, all doing clay masks for the first time for our girls' night in. This photo on the right-hand side here is my family members and I, minus my sister, Amber, and Candace. My immediate families and I. But all exploring a national park after a nearby tournament that I had in Arizona and in Utah. It was kind of like a weird location where it was just on the border of Arizona and Utah. But anyways, we got to go explore national parks afterwards, and I think this was Zion National Park, if I remember correctly. But anyways, moving on to adolescence and my biological development in that stage. Once I reached the stage of adolescence, my body underwent many significant changes. My body initiated sequences of puberty, some of which included growing breasts, varying body rhythms such as a circadian rhythm, which is essentially just my internal clock, and how that operates with sleep, and what time I get up, and what time I have my meals, and so forth. As well as this, my body also produced higher levels of estrogen, progesterone, and the start of a menstrual period, as well as increased fluctuation in activity in hormones, such as the pituitary stimulating my adrenal glands or my HPA axis, which influenced the gonads in the HPG axis. So moving on to cognitive development. At the onset of this stage in my development, I processed the world through a lens of egocentrism and thought in matters of black and white, and didn't really understand that there was an in-between. I didn't really know what that was. But however, as I progressed through this aspect of my development, I was able to grasp abstract thought and drew more interest in facets of love, justice, and freedom. I also began broadening my critical thinking skills and learning to question everything and everyone and authority and all of that good stuff, rather than just merely just accepting things as true or making assumptions based off of knowledge that I already had prior. So I think this is a really pivotal point in my development in which I learned to formulate my own opinions rather than just going to school just to learn. I also went to school to grow my development and in my processing of things, whether it be in social situations or in my understanding of phonics or things like that. So moving on to my psychological development. In this stage of my developmental journey, I expanded my perception of myself and delved into discovering my identity and the type of person that I wanted to be. Questions emerged, and I grappled with newfound feelings and also learned how to manage them and all that came with that. I also started striving for independence from my parents, often arguing with them about curfew rules that they set in place or persuading them to let me spend time with friends without the perceived necessity of their supervision. So if I just wanted to go down to the corner store with friends, rather than them having to give me a ride in the car, I would just ask them to let us walk together, which in most cases they would. But my older sister, Allison, would have to come along as supervision for us to make sure that we were safe and weren't engaging in any risky behavior or any reckless behavior. With this, I fell victim to peer pressure on many, many, many occasions. I also operated out of impulsiveness and a persistent longing to fit in with peers, usually disregarding what I knew to be right or acting recklessly, which is why my older sister Allison was often asked by my parents to kind of supervise, because though she was only a few years older, her brain had developed a little bit more, and she had the ability to maybe not engage as recklessly or to be able to process, hey, that might not be a good idea, and to just kind of steer me and my friends in a different, more healthy direction while not really killing the mood and still just having a good time cracking jokes with us. So moving on to my spiritual development of this stage. Around this period, I stepped into my faith a lot more with God And I learned that through difficulties in life, I can trust in Him and know that my identity and worth lie in Him, regardless of what I was going through, whether it be like a breakup with a friend, or whether it just be like stress or turmoil or things like that. I learned that He's with me always and that I can always lean on Him and depend in Him. I also learned that while many worldviews existed and offered an explanation to life and its purpose, none of them really lined up with like what I knew to be true. Like even within like my own internal morals and just like my own conscience, I think the only thing that really lined up for me was Christianity and what the Bible had to say about it. And it also aligned with the moral code in which I wanted to base my life upon as well. Not just the one that I already had, but the one that I was also working towards creating. So moving on to adulthood, which is the last section of my slideshow here today. So again, explaining the photos on the left side, this was taken a few weeks ago with Gracie on the left, my friend Tori on the middle, and then myself on the right at a baseball game that we went to go see. This middle photo here is me a few weeks ago as well, modeling in front of some vines because I thought it was really cool to have like the brick and like all like the greenery, but like not greenery, and just kind of have that kind of really cool moody effect to it. And then this picture on the right side is my friend Addison, me, and Mallory at our York University Singers Banquet. So touching upon my biological development in this stage. At my arrival into adulthood, my organ reverse or output of strength and resilience of my bodily organs, such as my heart or liver, my body's ability to effectively and quickly and easily maintain homeostasis, granted me the ability to push myself to physical feats such as performing all-nighters, to complete multiple homework assignments in college, and the physical energy to challenge myself rigorously, whether it be in softball or gym exercises, or just in the exercise that is getting a lot of homework assignments done in one day, because that is a lot. But as I have been developing in progressing in adulthood, I have understood the gravity of good sleep hygiene, regular exercise, and a balanced diet, and the role of these biological factors and that they play in my overall current and future states of physical, mental, and emotional health. On to my cognitive development. According to Piaget, I am now currently in a stage of development called post-formal thought. In this stage, I have since learned to view situations through a more objective lens, which is intentionally not processing information with a personal bias, rather than merely subjective, which is using a high personal understanding of a specific content or group of experiences. On to my psychological development. So a need for intimacy, either platonically or in romantic relationship, is ever present at this stage in development. Romantic relationships can provide me with three attributes of love, which are passion, intimacy, and commitment, each of which can add to my life in a significant way. Platonic relationships with friends augment my understanding of life as a general whole while providing me a safe space to navigate through exploring my identity, living in non-work or non-dictated freedoms, or non-school dictated freedoms, and battling feelings of not feeling like I'm as adultier as adults, or just feeling subpar or not like a full-fledged adult. And in this stage of my psychological development, I became more conscientious, grew into a more established and mature personality, and learned which attachment style I operate out of, and have been working towards a secure attachment. So moving on to my spiritual development. I'm currently broadening my understanding of God and learning to deepen my relationship with Him, as well as depending on Him in situations of uncertainty, whether it be constant address changes, because I'm a college student and I bounce around between California and Nebraska quite often, grasping new realities as an emerging adult, or managing responsibility a lot more often and a lot more frequently. Anyways, with all of this, I know that God is with me as a support and a guide always. Through my formative years, I learned mountains of knowledge ranging from ranging from how rattles make noise when I shake them, to my attachment style and how to effectively manage independence and all that adulthood entails. I was educated more on Jesus and his presence in morality and psychology, as well as other facets of life. And though I've been made aware of much, there is still many areas in life that my knowledge can and will increase as I progress through the stages of adulthood and throughout the duration of my life as a whole.